90 days to find a new bank. That is the notice that dairy producers across the country have been receiving recently more than ever before. And that is the call that has Pauly Paul's phone ringing off the hook. Pauly Paul from Complete Management Consulting is the call many of these dairies are making to help them figure out their next right move to position their dairy, either for their future or possibly for an exit strategy. And we're going to find out today how he is helping walk these dairies through this difficult scenario and what you can do right now to position yourself for a profitable and sustainable future for your dairy farming business. Hear this and more today right here on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy farm owners, managers, and advisors who are committed to profitability, sustainability, and excellence. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and it's my mission to bring you the conversations that will uplevel your skill set and your mindset so you can be a top performer in the dairy farming business. This episode is brought to you by HighGround Dairy. HighGround Dairy provides global dairy market intelligence, insurance services, futures and options brokerage, and advisory programs to a diverse range of dairy market participants throughout the supply chain. You can find all the links to connect to HighGround Dairy in our show notes, and be sure to tune in each month right here on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast for a market update from HighGround Dairy. Now, sit back and take some notes from Pauly Paul, Dairy Management Consultant with Complete Management Consulting.
So we've been getting phone calls and emails and from lenders, from dairy people all over the U.S. this year, more and more than ever, from dairy people that are being asked to find new lenders. And with the way the economy is going right now, it's very difficult to jump from one lending institute to another. So many times when these calls come in, it's to the point to where the bank gives them so much time to find a new lender. And it might be 90 days, it might be 100 days, or whatever that might be. There's usually a deadline put on there. And so we get those phone calls saying, oh, what do we do now? And many times we'll even get the phone calls from the lender beforehand, before they've put a deadline on it. And then we'll get called into these dairies and try to help turn them around. But when they get a deadline, things are pretty serious. And we're seeing so many of them this year. It's more than I've ever seen before. And I think part of it is obviously the economy and the interest rates. But there's a lot of stressed lenders out there right now trying to deal with dairies that are struggling and aren't making any money. And I think a lot of that has to do with the feed costs for the past few years and the milk price. So all of that combined is really adding up for the perfect storm right now when it comes to dairies trying to find a different lender. So I think it's really important for the lenders and the dairy people that when you do get into that situation, you need to make some very drastic changes, and we need to look at really what's going on in your dairy. And a lot of times when we get called to these dairies and we start working with them, we'll come up with a long list of things that need to change. And a lot of times we can work our way through those things and get those things to happen. But when we get into those situations, it's like we need to do them, and we need to do them yesterday already. So what I try to encourage people to do is let us help you through that process. Let us help you get those changes made and made fast so that you can actually show your lender that you're actually going to be able to cash flow. And once you show that you're able to cash flow, many times they're going to give you a lot more time to either find a new lender or continue to stay with them, and they'll help you work through that process. The ones that don't seem to be successful on that are the ones that try to dig their heels in and don't let us help you get those changes done, and we're not able to help you cash flow. So in return, the lender doesn't want to deal with that any longer. So you might be put on their high risk credit rating, so your interest rates are going to be bumped a little bit higher than what normally would happen. So you're shelling out more money that you don't even have. So again, I think it's very important when that time comes, you need to have some good conversations with your lender and find out what they really want, what they want to see, and then you got to make sure you achieve those goals. If that goal is to show them that you're going to cash flow within the next 6 months, great. Let's figure it out. Let's get it done. Let's do it. There's always a way to get that figured out. It's just a matter of how are you going to get there. One of the key things that has helped us get some of these dairies flip back into the black was working day to day with them, going through all their expenses, looking at what they're doing with the labor and trying to organize things, make sure they're not overspending on things. Obviously, we're looking at all the key areas, looking at the feed. With corn and soybean prices were so high, they've come down now, and that's helping a lot of people. Milk income is looking better as time goes on here, so that's going to help. And for some, it's too little too late. They're not going to be able to turn around. But for the majority of these farms, there is a way to get turned around. We got to really focus in on every expense all the way down the line and figure out how we can get a little more income. One of the things I see on a lot of these dairies when they do get to that point is they're checked out. They don't know what to do or where to turn. And I always encourage them, let us help you. Let us get in there with you and work through this process. And we're going to show you a way out of it, show you the light at the end of the tunnel, and try to get you through it. The ones I do struggle with are the ones that just keep saying, hey, we've done it this way forever, or that doesn't work on our farm. Well, the reason it doesn't work on your farm is because it probably wasn't managed properly. So I know it's hard for people to take a step back and let somebody else do the management stuff. But in these situations, when you're being given a deadline, I think it's very important for you to step back, take a breath, let us come in and help you through that process and work through it. So when you do get into these situations where you're being given a deadline and we're working through a plan with you, helping you get from point A to point B, we also help trying to put together a loan package to present to other lenders and see if there's any other takers out there. We work with them trying to make sure, we got all the numbers right, the balance sheets, the cash flows, making sure that we put together the best package we can for you so that any new lender is going to look at that and hopefully be encouraged to help you through this process also. If not, when you decide that you're not going to want to proceed or follow through with that, and maybe it's something you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, we can help you through that process too and try to get the dairy sold or leased or whatever that may be. We help you get through that entire process, whichever way you want to go. I think the most important thing is for you to sit back and realize which direction you want to go or how you want to be helped. I think there's always a way to figure out how to get the dairy turned around and making money, but maybe you've had enough. You're wore out and you're at that age where you want to try to make some money and retire. Well, maybe that's the way you need to go. But I think it's very important for you to just take that time when you do get that call, make a call to us, and then we can help you through that process and figure out which way you want to go. So I think in the past couple of years here with the downturn in the dairy economy, we've been getting and fielding more and more calls from stressed lenders. And I think when we look at how stressed you are in your day-to-day life and maybe you're not financially sound, I see a lot of that same stress coming from the lenders. So a lot of these lenders they have people to report back to and people that are getting on them because they have a few dairies that aren't making money and are making things look bad on them. So yeah, I've gotten plenty of phone calls from lenders that are just very stressed this year. And I think it's important that we all work together to try to get that stress level relieved. And the dairy people sometimes feel like they're alone when they do get these messages, and it's hard for a lender to go to a dairy and say, hey, you need to find a new lender, we're done with you. That's a pretty tough visit to make, and I think it's something that, when you do get that, we need to have a discussion and try to figure out a way through that. So I think what we've seen here in the past year is cattle inventory numbers become a big issue, whether you're trying to purchase cattle or you're trying to fill a new barn or whatever you might be doing. I think that's become a big stress on the dairy industry, trying to move these cattle around, even with, the threat of the bird flu and whatnot going on. I see cattle prices just soaring right now, and I've had a couple dairy people that are struggling come to me and say, hey, maybe it's the time that we sell our cattle right now. And I'm thinking, yeah, that might be a good idea, but there's a process to go through before you just say, hey, I want to sell my cows. A lot of the dairies I work with that are struggling, we try to go through the whole cash flow process and figure out, all right, if we get rid of these cattle at top dollar, the prices we're hearing now are some of the highest I've heard in a long time. But I think before you decide that, yes, I am going to sell my cattle, you need to have a plan for your debt. I've had a couple dairies that thought, okay, if I sell my cattle, I don't have to do that work anymore, yada, yada, yada. But they still have debt. Now they're going to have to sell their buildings. They're going to have to sell their land. They may even have to sell their house just to clear the debt that they have with the lender that they have. So I've been able to work through some processes on some of these farms and figure out a way how to sell their cattle, move their cattle off to another dairy, and still have enough income to save their house or save the land. Or we had a plan in place, went to the lender, and we went through this stuff, and we got this figured out how we could get through the whole process. But yeah, there is a lot of people out there right now looking for cattle, and it's going to continue that way for a while, I think, and I don't see an end to that one for a little while here yet. So being that the cattle inventories are very tight, replacements are tight, I still encourage a lot of dairies that I work with not to raise their young stock because they weren't very good at it to begin with. And I think the amount of money that people are paying for the crossbreeds right now, the Angus Holstein crosses, I think the amount of money and the amount of income that people are generating from that, I think that far outweighs a lot of the dairies that I work with that don't raise their young stock anymore and are considering going back to raising their young stock. If you're not good at something, don't do it. Even on a lot of the robot dairies that I work with, I think they want to get good cattle in that are going to work good in a robot. I think you just go buy them on some of these dairies rather than try to raise them and then have a handful more that aren't going to actually make it into robots. So yeah, I wouldn't let the cattle prices and the cattle inventory scare you too much on that end, because I think you're still getting the income off of the calves to where you're able to cover the cost of not raising them. So if you're one of the dairies that are struggling right now and you've gotten this notice from your lender that you are no longer wanted by them anymore and you need to find somebody else, I think it's very important, like I said before, that we sit down and go through things. But right off the bat, I think we need to look at your feed costs and labor and look at those things. Feed costs, we just had one dairy recently where we took well over $30,000 a month out of their feed costs just by changing what they were doing. They had some really good forages. They were purchasing in all these extra feed additives. They're buying some soy hulls. They're buying some corn gluten pellets, and they're buying all these extra products that, yes, on paper it looked like it was cheaper for them, but they put too high of a value on their forages, and they had plenty of forage, which was already purchased and bought and paid for, sitting on a feed slab. So we worked through some things, increased the amount of forage that they were feeding, and cut their feed costs by, again, it was well over $30,000 a month, and to me it was a no-brainer, and it helped them be able to cash flow when it was all said and done. So I think it's very important to look at that stuff on the labor side of things. We've had multiple dairies here where we've walked into it that have gotten these notices and basically had to reorganize how they were doing things. We're able to cut some labor. It's pretty easy for us, when we walk into some of these dairies to see where they're lacking on the labor side and just organize things. And to me, that's a big key, just organization, making sure that everybody's doing what needs to be done in a timely manner and and just putting together something on paper and how it needs to be done. It's amazing how much labor you can cut by doing that. If you're one of the dairy people out there right now that hasn't had a conversation with your lender, or your lender hasn't told you that you're basically on their naughty list, maybe have that conversation with them and just ask them, where do you rank amongst all the clients that they have? And maybe it's a goal for you to say, all right, I want to be one of your best clients. And how are we going to do that? Well, that's where you give us a call and we work through some stuff, and we can help you get to be one of the best clients on your lender's list if we're willing to work through some things. And not always the best client is going to be somebody that has the most money borrowed, but it's going to be the one that's going to be able to pay it back the quickest, or maybe purchase land down the road. You want to be ahead of the game so that when somebody decides to sell a piece of property, you're there to be able to grab it. I think that's something you need to have that conversation with your lender. Just see where you are. Are you in a good position, or are you on the verge of being asked to find somewhere else to get your money? Have those conversations and see where you're at. And I think it's important for you to try to get to the next level. I think that's what we strive for when we work with a lot of dairies, is try to get them better than what they are.
You just heard from dairy management consultant Pauly Paul from Complete Management Consulting, and how he is helping dairies work through one of the biggest challenges that are hitting their businesses right now: the challenge of finding a new lender, and the challenge of positioning themselves for their own future, or perhaps even an exit strategy. And if this information was valuable to you, if this is something that you need help with right now, you can check out Pauly's contact information in our show notes. And this episode is brought to you by HighGround Dairy. HighGround Dairy provides global market intelligence, insurance services, futures and options brokerage, and advisory programs to a diverse range of dairy market participants throughout the supply chain. Make sure you come back each month right here to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast for a monthly market update from HighGround Dairy. And if you like this episode, please do us a favor and make sure that you are going to your favorite listening app to rate and review. Give us a 5-star rating, or better yet, drop a review in Apple or in Spotify. Those are the things that help us continue to grow the Uplevel Dairy Podcast and continue to serve the dairy community. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast.